This anime is obviously a romantic school comedy. Haruhi and I are the main characters, so that means we are love interests. Yeah, then what are we? You boys are the homosexual supporting cast.
Yeah, we're gonna need to talk about this, aren't we? While I wouldn't say harem animes have particularly dominated my anime watching tastes as of late, I definitely noticed a pretty drastic change in what I watch as I get older, specifically in regards to romance, shoujo, and harems. I think it was around 15 when I started to catch actual feelings for living, breathing human boys, whereas I kinda needed an outlet to scream over instead of just losing my mind to another hapless straight boy. Harems for some reason filled that slot. I think it was that there was just at least always one girl I could find some sort of common ground with. Usually the shy, reluctant best friend type. I know, typecast, but hey, I'm none but honest. Looking back, why I decided to watch 2 entire seasons of Nisekoi rather than actually going out and sucking dick was an odd choice. But after a lot of drinking and therapy, I've come to a point where I think it'll be at least interesting to go back and look at some of the stuff that I used to watch and just kind of where I am now. Oh yeah, and context for this, I'm a 25-year-old deeply gay rap bastard cis man, so whatever I was doing crying my eyes out to Toradora at 2 AM on a school night is beyond me, but you get what you get. Legit, I've watched way too much straight harem anime for someone with daddy issues and a nose piercing, but yet I've seen a pretty fair smorgasbord of harem anime over the years. Some of my personal favourites being My Little Monster, Toradora, and Isekoi. So you can probably tell what era I was actually watching this stuff. Not many of the classics I've seen, but I wouldn't really call myself a complete novice at this at the same time. Oh, and screw it, people have already clicked away at this point. I'm just gonna say it. Horimiya is mid. I'm sorry, I'm honest, and I'm just gonna say it right now. It's not that great. While preparing for this video, however, I thought I'd kinda have to look back at the genre's Big Daddy, the show that strung 1,000 fuckboys along with its particular blend of slice of life chilling with hot dog simping. So yeah, I finally sat down and actually watched some of Love Hina. Releasing in 2000, Love Hina was maybe the single most popular and rampant slice of life romance harem has or will ever be for anime watching audiences, to be honest, as it begun and cemented so many tropes we now know as second nature today. The 25-episode anime adapted the original manga run of the series written by Ken Akumatsu, a sort of visionary who we all know for making AI I Love You, a manga about a man who fucks his own computer program. So, you know, this is the level of themes we're working with today, guys. Love Hina revolves entirely around Keitaro, a dump truck bitch of an ass man whose entire life goal has been to graduate to Tokyo University and see the girl he promised to meet up with years ago as a child. Shocker, he doesn't do that because he's the character equivalent of a bowl of porridge, but instead ends up the manager of an all-girls apartment complex, where he is tasked to take care of, let's be polite and say various aged women.
You draw really well.
Oh, thanks. It's just a sketch.
I think it's great. Hey, what's your name?
Yeah.
I think the concept of milk dick protagonist definitely comes from Love Hina, or at least it popularized it in the West, because the core emotional connection of a lot of harems have to hinge on its main character actually being likable, in at least some way to a lot of different people, and I find it insane that a show this popular has a protagonist this emotionally manipulative, destructive, and just outright lame. Then again, this is the straights I suppose we're talking about. The worst part about it is this cumsock of a protagonist is surrounded by some pretty great girls. They all have really distinct and timeless designs to them, and they each harbour a fun character trope or two. Hell, I'd have loved to actually just watch a show about these girls hanging out before Keitaro actually showed up. Though, while saying that, not all the girls are made equal, especially with whatever the fuck this dub did to Koala's voice.
Oh, this is gonna be trouble.
Well, what are we gonna do?
You better watch your backside if you know it's good for you!
Huh?
I think the main issue I hold with Love Hina though is how it presents its supposedly cute moments between its male lead and its female love interests. In most harem I've seen, there's at least some kind of degree of tsundere, wacky, will they, won't they dynamic, but it's usually flipped in a way that makes sense, be it an upperclassman with a chip on their shoulder, a Yakuza family, or just the two main leads being hotheads. They usually at least feel believable in some way or another, but that's because the genre has had so long to expand and grow. Yeah, not in Love Hina. Y'all, the bar was so low for this shit. Early on, there's an episode where the two main romantic leads go to a vacation spot, separate of each other, and lose their glasses and think the other is someone else they've never met and end up falling for each other. Despite many times previously the girl doesn't wear glasses around the protagonist. Like, what even is this? This is absolutely nothing.
Weak, limp, lifeless.
Despite it all, I can't even say I dislike Love Hina. It's got way too strong of a vibe to even say it's uninteresting on any level. I think the show's greatest appeal comes in pretty much everything that surrounds its core cast. Its setting of a sleepy Japanese college town. Setting has a really good sense of place with a bunch of fun recurring townfolk, changing seasonal episodes, and a goddamn comfy ass house. The music as well is nuts, by the way. I don't know if it's the latent zoomer in me, but it feels nostalgic for goddamn meat and fuck game vibes. A vibe I can sadly never use in these videos because it's copyright blocked all hell, but you know what I mean. Yellow sunsets, horny intentions, low budget, and a mind full of dreams. It's one part trance jazz Christmas shopping, part one drum and bass panic attack.
Hannah Montana, Ariana Grande, EDM glitchcore remix featuring Charlie XCX and Kim Petras.
And if there's one thing I implore you to look up about Love Hina, even in a passive sense, it's its OST, including its dope-ass OP. Hell, you could just watch the OP and you'd be good, to be honest. I think this is what a lot of harem anime actually get right, to be honest. The space where romance takes place is very important, and a lot of these shows present shared spaces like apartments and small close suburbs in a really ideal way. It's small, but the sense of community and place these cast members can find in these small sleepy little dwellings are why me and many others keep coming back to harem anime. It's dumb to say, but you want to see some anime hanging out sometimes, and that's cool.
Hanging out.
Spaces and settings in anime tend to go a mile a minute, so when a show like a harem is entirely based around the familiar and the everyday while building up its main cast around it, you as the viewer kind of become ingrained in that shit and you become comfier for better or worse. I think that's what kept me coming back to romance and harem as a teen, because there was something about a bunch of independent people living together in relationships that was compelling. This structure is why Taiga found Ryuji's house so inviting, why Izumi was able to let his guard down around Hori, and why multiple gorgeous women adopt this weenie, because he needs a home and the structure of a harem gives him one, both him and the viewer respectively. It's a damn shame that I had to substitute straight harems my entire life though. There is not really much gay ones out there and I always felt like one was missing. Speaking of harem anime structure actually, one thing I've always been a little weird on is what actually classifies an anime as a harem, to be honest. Because you have plenty of big casts in romance that don't meet the criteria. Wikipedia describes harem anime as a genre of light novels, manga, anime, hentai, and video games originating in Japan in the 1970s but exploding in the late 1980s and 90s with dating simulator games, yada yada. Don't worry, we'll get to that later. Here we go. Focusing on polygynous or polyandrous relationships, where a protagonist is surrounded by 3 or more androphilic, gynophiliac love interests or sexual partners. Now that's a really weird description, because for almost all the harem anime I've seen, not a single one of these people actually define themselves as having multiple partners, be it in a literal traditional harem or a polyamorous relationship. I think that comes from the often assumed fantasy of the male viewer in these shows, and that the girls could and should end up Mr. No-Name Dinker here. And sure, I'm certain somewhere in the infinite cosmos of harem anime there is a sweet and well-structured poly or multi-formed relationship, but the common viewer isn't really gonna find that at first hand, and that's kind of what a lot of the genre looks like. Again, the definition is so weird, by the logic often assumed by harem anime just being a romance between multiple people. So many goddamn shows could be defined as a harem. Sure, early stuff is weird and vague no matter what, we could argue for hours if Ranma or Tenchi are harems, but I'm more confused by the later stuff. Like, yo, I could make the argument that goddamn Evangelion is a harem. Captain Tyler, Shirakumo Cafe, fucking Moomins, any of these could be a harem. Literally, what couldn't be described as a harem anime? What about MTV's hit 2005 reality dating show Next?
You have a really weak handshake, so I have to say next. You're really ugly, and it's your loss, bitch. Whatever, you're the loser here.
Thomas had never seen such a mess.
If you don't already know the premise of this show, basically, think Bait Bus meets Love Island. All the emotional turmoil of the third act of Justin to Kelly or Crossroads, but it's 22 minutes and like a bunch of episodes a season. And to all the Zoomers who watch me and have no idea what I actually just said, yeah, basically a bunch of guys get on a bus and all attempt to date one girl, have a time basis for each date, and at any point the girl can yell next and the date's over. Also, they have these incredible intro cards for each guy. God, I wonder what mine would be. Hi, my name's Coffee Cakes, I'm 25, and I once solved IBS by sitting on a toilet and sniffing poppers. I bring this show up specifically because instead of most harem anime, this one actually features a few gay episodes. What I find so compelling about these gay episodes in particular is that much like actual harem anime, these men are pretty much roped into a bizarre nightmare of showmanship in order to get one hapless idiot. But proving that it can be done in a gay context, in my opinion, pushing the inherently camp nature of harems to their absolute limits with sound effects, affectations, flair, and sometimes we see that in spades in today's main event. A little anime that took the world by storm. I know this is the world's worst segue, but I'm of course talking about Bisco Hattori's classic, Ouran High School Club. It should be classified as an absolute crime that it has taken me to the year 2022 to finally sit down and watch Ouran High School Club in its entirety. Cancel me if it needs be, but for some reason this bonkers brilliant little show had just escaped me up until now, and with the genesis of writing the script in my head and my eye for queer tinged anime, this thing had to be discussed in one way or another. The original manga was written by industry titan Bisco Hattori, who originally worked at Lala, a Japanese shoujo magazine targeted primarily to teenage to 20-year-old girls who just wanted to see some pretty ass people do pretty ass flirting. She began her first work, Millennium Snow, at the magazine until it was quite literally put on extended hiatus because Ouran was such a smash hit right out of the gate. And that just shows you how much of a success Ouran really was. The manga aside, the anime production may have gone on to become one of the most seminal pieces of anime of the mid-2000s for a hell of a lot of people. That shit and Hetalia had the girls on lock. Oddly enough, if you look at the stuff that Hattori was influenced by, it's not at first glance what you'd expect from a shoujo artist. She cites stuff like Please Save My Earth and of all things, goddamn Slam Dunk. In a way, I suppose that makes sense when you really think about it. I mean, Slam Dunk is a pretty obvious yaoi angle to its cultural impact. Hell, these hands were made to handle balls. Hey, so editing coffee here. I noticed that when I was researching Bisco Hattori more, I kind of stumbled into noticing that the top search results for her include who wrote Ouran's High School Club? Does Bisco Hattori have social media? Is the host club a BL? And is Ouran a clamp? Now, with all that being said, it's not like we really need to take her creative idea and talent as gospel here, and in comparison to the show, the two works are very different and have some really big tonal differences. I mean, have you seen some of the really early Ouran pages? Mori looks like a goddamn Chills bullet point. Number 9, the Mori Feels apparition. Just when you thought it would be safe to read your manga, Bisco Hattie had other plans for you. The actual anime adaptation of the manga released in 2006 and was adapted from the popular manga of the same name that ran from 2002 to 2010 in the issues of Lala. It follows the story of Haruhi Fujioka, a new student at the prestigious Ouran High School, where she is essentially gaslit into becoming the latest member of the school's acclaimed host club, which, in the show's definition, is...
The Ouran Host Club is where the school's handsomest boys with too much time on their hands entertain young ladies who also have way too much time on their hands.
Through the course of the show, she gets to know each of the member of the club in great detail, though not all in a romantic sense, as while it's still a harem in many ways, Haruhi is only really courted by 3 of the members. Speaking of the members, let's run down this twink list.
That mischievous, inquiring twink.
In total, there's 7 members of the club, with a few random guys who slot in and out over the show's run. But the main cast is pretty consistent. Each represent a very specific trope that the show itself actually discusses and plays around with in order to be marketable to the girls attending the club. You got the Shoto with the honey, you got the silent type with Mori, twincest with Karuhu and Hikaru, Kyoya has the cunning glasses kun vibe, and then there's Tamaki.
I never found you funny, I never found you entertaining, I never found you smart. I just found you annoying.
There's a lot of very self-aware commentary on anime and character tropes with this cast. The dub in particular really plays into the tongue-in-cheek side of the cast's clear character traits a lot, which is interesting because the show's dub was actually handled by the English voice actor of Haruhi, Caitlin Glass, who acted as the director for the entire English dub as well as singing some of the opening. Which, by the way, yeah, gotta give a quick shout out to the absolute timeless banger that is Kiss Kiss Fall in Love.
Kiss, kiss, fall in love.
Yeah, Caitlin's work on the dub really helped cement to me the tone of Ouran, presenting its cast as immediately discernible to the average anime viewer, but using their tropes for the show's comedy, and yeah, Ouran is still really fucking funny. A lot of the comedy really holds up. Not to say all of it lands, don't worry, we will get to that, but I think its dub mostly works in the confines of what a mid-2000s anime dub was, and plays into the tropes really well. And to be honest, not just the main cast, I think the anime has some of the best recurring side characters in the business. The Dark Arts Club, the Zuka Club, hell, the introduction of Viva Renge adds so much intertextual references to the show. Renge in particular, god, like, she fucking pulls out a certified Tomumeki memorial moment for fuck's sake.
He looks like the star of the popular dating sim Okie Dokie Memorial.
Shit is absolutely inspired, and it fits the show's harem and dating sim influences so naturally. Actually, no, fuck it. Speaking of Okie Dokie Memorial whatever, did y'all actually know there's an Ouran game for the Nintendo DS? This thing released as a Japanese exclusive in 2009, and it's literally just called Ouran High School Club DS. And I think there's even an earlier PS2 title from 2006 as well. I couldn't find as much about that one. Now, seeing as this thing seems to be impossible to find any real info on, I semi-interviewed friend of the channel, Loveland Island, or Alyssa as some of you know, as I think she's maybe the only human I know who has played the damn thing. From what we can figure out, it's a dating sim where you play as Haruhi, and as per usual, you're roped into the club. But it actually develops each of the boys into fully fledged roots, meaning you actually get to see some AUs where, for example, Haruhi ends up with Mori or Honey, two characters who essentially are just dating in the show, but here you actually get to see them in a completely new side, which is super cool. Then again, it's funny to think that in the manga canon of Ouran, goddamn Honey gets married first, and of all things, it's to a fucking got titty GF. Bisco baited the readers so hard with the Mori X Honey stuff, and psych, nah, you just get the stripes.
Can you say gay rights? I don't know if I can say that.
Anyway, the game seems super cute and weird. I'm glad it explores some new shit and the cast, and even introduces a whole new slew of hot new people to interact with who are exclusive to the game only. It's even getting a translation currently by a bunch of people over at the YouTube channel Ouran High School Club, the manga dub. So hopefully one day we will see this thing added to more Tumblr front page algorithms and Wattpad story inspirations for years to come. Now, I'm not super savvy on shoujo as a genre in general. I think it's a pretty big blank in my anime history, so I can't speak from a massive in-depth genre piece here, but I've been told to at least give something like Kasamina Kiss a watch, so I'm dipping my toe in, I swear. I've seen a spattering of cute romance here and there that you could call shoujo. Stuff like My Little Monster or Ore Monogatari come to mind for sure. From my understanding, the term shoujo is a pretty loose term used to define a form of media that is targeted towards a teen female audience, mostly focusing on romance, harems, or fantasy. I mean, the term quite literally translates to young woman, which, yes, technically you could be argued is pretty indicative of Ouran, for example. But I think the show is way too gay to just stop there. And yeah, I know technically Ouran is classified as a reverse harem.
It's a reverse harem!
But the way the show discusses gender in even episode 1 is sort of wildly ahead of its time. The show talks about some pretty queer angles, to be honest, with its cast. I mean, Haruhi in particular explores what it means to be both a woman, a man, or anything in between with both her clothing and her approach to the boys.
Listen, senpai, I don't really care whether you guys recognize me as a boy or a girl. In my opinion, it's more important for a person to be recognized for who they are rather than for what sex they are.
And yes, I know all of these men are technically posed to be straight. Okay, well, maybe not Honey and Mori, but yeah, at least 3 of these men are fighting for Haruhi's affection. But I mean, no matter what a lot of these guys do, it's pretty inflamed in some pretty palpable queer energy. It's hard not to see.
By the way, that hairstyle doesn't look so great on you. If you want to go out with us, you should work on your fashion sense. And next time you write a love letter, make it good.
Material word. I want Chanel 9 boots. Saw these niggas steady jocking cause they know I'm the truth. Material word. And I get it from my mammy bar main. Bust down, these hoes can't stand me.
To go back to that clip from the beginning, yeah, the show does pose the boys as gay in their tones and affectations, but it's mostly pretty skin deep in regards to actual representation. Though Though, not like it doesn't add its value. Seeing these guys be so free and welcoming to all genders in their club is actually very sweet. And the show as it goes on becomes less about the harem aspect and more a multiple part character study on a group of teenage boys who have some pretty serious issues with their identity. And it's up to Haruhi, queen of the not other girls, to help them through it. Sure, does she need to? Well, no, but I appreciate the show handles the boys' issues like depression, family expectation, and dissociated disorders with empathy first, comedy second. Now, while saying that, Orhan is by no means perfect. For all the good the show has, there are, let's say some questionable elements. Namely, the show's incredibly bizarre approach to Haruhi's father, Ryoji Fujioka. Oh god, how am I going to talk about this? Jesus. Never in my life did I expect when starting Orhan High School Club in the year 2022 was I going to hear Vic Mignogna say the T slur to the absolute point of exhaustion. But boys, Jesus folks, we're here. To be honest, Ryoji is actually great. He's an openly bisexual cis man who works as an entertainer at an Okama bar, which, if you don't know, is essentially a Japanese term that has no direct English translation because it's so difficult to pin down, though it's generally seen as a heterosexual lens for anything considered generally queer. It can mean literally anything. It can go from homosexual men, drag queen, crossdresser, trans woman. It can be both a noun as well as an adjective, a positive, a negative. It's loaded to say the least. So yeah, essentially the show presents him as a cross-dressing entertainer who prefers to be called Ranka while working. So, like, saying drag queen is probably a little too general for the concept of Okama, but in general he's definitely a cool dude who's not afraid of exploring gender in its many elements. And he's a pretty good dad to boot. He's great. What is not great is how the host club treats him.
What dashing young men you are! These hunks must belong to Haruhi! Another fluttering tranny?
Well, mostly Tamaki for some fucking weird reason. The twins at least call him a crossdresser, which is probably a little too literal, but at least it's not a goddamn slur. You know, just in case you needed another reason to think Tamaki isn't the literal worst boy. And the craziest part about this is that it's way less blatant in the sub because the term Okama is used. Here in the dub, Tamaki literally just decides to go out of his way to call them a slur. Not sure if that's a translation tone issue or literally just an attempt to make Tamaki less likable. I legit have no clue if I'm being honest. It makes no sense to me. God, am I really out here in 2022 trying to cancel Vic Mignogna? I'm nothing but punctual, what can I say? This shit isn't exclusive to this one episode though. Like later the gang dresses up in drag in an absolutely bizarre attempt to make Haruhi not want to leave the club after she's courted by the arguably way better Zuko Club, a gang of theatrical lesbians who fall endlessly in love with Haruhi, which is sort of a weird recurring trope for a girl whose entire life goal is to go buy eggs on the weekend. But hey girl, I get it. Sometimes it's hard out there, you just gotta go get those eggs. What the fuck am I writing? Let's also not forget maybe the most batshit episode in the entire show. Episode 8. It's a pretty traditional beach episode, and for some reason the entire episode is based around the gang essentially gaslighting Haruhi for standing up for herself against some creeps, and is then fucking assaulted by Kyoya out of absolutely nowhere, and she's just fine with it and accepts she's wrong and then apologizes, and it's the absolute worst, and I fucking hate it.
Electric chair.
Kyoya assaulting the main female lead to prove a point that doesn't even exist is big Grimes Elon Musk inviting Azealia Banks over energy. Absolute chaos. So, like, I get that forced romance scenes are pretty common in shoujo, Yuri and yaoi in particular, so it's not like shocking in a genre sense, it's more that this is so singular in the anime it comes off as a fucking fan service jump scare. A lot of these problematic elements can mostly be chalked up to its time. Stuff like Princess Jellyfish wouldn't come out for another 4 years or so, but I don't want to make it sound as if these issues are to be forgiven or ignored either. You gotta look at 2006 for anime, it was an absolute groundbreaking year for the medium. Tastes were being made with stuff like Death Note, Higurashi, Kanon, and Haruhi, so the medium was molding and changing at a rapid pace, and all these shows went on to become absolute industry titans. And Orhan is absolutely no different despite all of its issues. It just at times tries so many self-aware jabs at gender, harems, and the genre, it sort of just trips itself up sadly. And weirdly though, the show actually almost addresses this during the scene where the boys dress up in drag. because Haruhi's reaction is exactly how I felt about a lot of the show's weirder tonal moments. I'm not trying to excuse the blatant transphobia or the weird assault stuff. This shit has legit painted the show with a little bit of a sour taste for me after watching it, but I can still look at it as a somewhat flawed attempt at a really fun queer-themed harem that, while it does stumble, has become one of the most iconic animes in modern history for a goddamn reason. Maybe I sound a lot more negative about this anime than I originally thought. God, what do most people do when they need to pull out an excuse for tone issue in media?
Camp Taste turns its back on the good-bad axis of ordinary aesthetic judgment. Camp doesn't reverse things. It doesn't argue that the good is bad or that the bad is good. What it does is to offer for art and life a supplementary set of standards.
Okay, yeah.
Camp isn't something that should inherently be an excuse for media aging poorly or actual problematic stuff, which some of Ouran absolutely is, but for me, I find the way Ouran presents its entire cast and world as anything but cynical or negative. As the series went on, I really started to notice that the real message behind it wasn't about making fun of tropes or even its actual love story. It was that Haruhi was the one person in all these people's lives who helped them come to terms with a lot of their societal norms and expectations forced upon them. I mean, it makes sense, these are a bunch of rich snobs.
Rich people! Rich people!
They've been brought up to be established into their family lineages since birth, and hey, for as much as I kind of have shat on Tamaki during this video, I kind of see why he is the way he is. Dude spent his entire life wearing a mask to protect himself and his mother, even in the face of his own dad not wanting him.
Until delivered that baby. Look, that's not my son.
What I'm trying to say is, Ouran at its core is actually about finding the things in life that make you really happy and casting away the things that you think you ought to be. Something Haruhi helps each one of these weirdos find, be it liking cute things, discovering your individuality, or if you are problematic as hell, you can still do a lot of good to the people around you if you try. I think that sums up Ouran quite nicely, actually, come to think of it. It's a harem with a lot of heart, but presents its cast as flawed idiots first and follows their journeys to find a real support system, which is why I still think it can be seen as a queer harem at the end of the day. These idiots need Haruhi, and she needs them, because they somewhat make their lives better. Regardless if any of them even date, harems aren't always even about that. What I guess I'm saying is, a family really can be a gender non-conforming girl boss and her 5 twinks. And I think that's beautiful. So, harems are weird. They're confusing as hell to think about on a textual level, be it anime or games, and while I've seen a fair few good ones in my time, I've never really found one that was specifically targeted towards me, Coffee. This cat-themed blob of a bottom who exists on the search. Because, I mean, who in their right mind would do that, right? Well, folks, I found one, and yeah, just go with me on this one, okay? As discussed before in my gay swimming video, this channel is a yaoi free zone. I say that because I have never in my days read or watched a full yaoi series, which, come to think of it, is pretty wild looking at what I create and consume now. But I mean, it's not like I didn't have that outlet as a teen, I was just different. Not like other girls, if you will. Yes folks, I instead took the road less traveled, because I'm a Bara fan.
An active bear doesn't always have the time to take a shower. My secret, a few drops of Orangina. Orangina, naturally.
If you're unfamiliar with the term, Bara is a genre of Japanese art that translates to literally just gay manga. A term used because it is mostly stories about gay men and created for a gay male audience first. whereas you could say the exact opposite for something like yaoi. That still is a little too literal of a definition for me though, as yaoi can be just as gay as bara in my opinion. While bara tends to focus on way more of the masculine attributes of a gay man, usually focusing on big boys, basically bear culture in manga form. Mask for mask hentai, if you will. One of the most popular artists of the movement would be someone like Gengoro Tagami, whose work has actually bridged the gap between straight up porn and impactful statements on queerness in Japan in recent years. Funny thing though is, even he, the granddaddy of masochistic bara smut, agrees with me on the fundamental issue of gay manga being segregated by what gender writes it. He talks about this in an interview where he states, "There have been examples of pieces by heterosexual male or female artists being featured in gay magazines and becoming popular with gay readers. So in many cases, the pieces function and serve as gay erotic art regardless of the artist's own sexuality." You probably actually know Tagami from his recent success with the My Brother's Husband series, one of his first non-pornographic series that deals with some pretty heavy issues surrounding being a queer man in the view of Japanese public, surrounded with a really lovely, raw and nostalgic heart. If you're in any way interested in this guy's work, I'd definitely recommend this series in particular as a jumping off point. Though sadly, due to its success, it's actually driven up all the smut in price pretty drastically, but I did score a secondhand copy of Massive, a neat little anthology history piece that goes over a bunch of bara artists, including Daddy Tagami. Absolute coffee table vibes. Though I will say the same for a lot of what I'm gonna be talking about. This shit is extremely not safe for work, so please proceed with research and watching with caution. Though don't worry, I'll do my best to censor where I can. So yeah, bara was my sexual awakening in a way. Or at least the general vibe was. I wasn't out here looking up the passion of Gengoro Tagami as a kid, but I did have way too many feelings about Bear in the Big Blue House. I've talked about it before. From an early age I realized I was more into guys like Barrett than Cloud, and my hentai and fan art tastes follow suit. Though because of this I was shit out of a lot of luck of seminal pieces other people would have had growing up. I didn't have a big titty anime like Ikitosen. I had to make do with Newgrounds Flash games where you undress Dick Gumshoe for fuck's sake. But because of that scarcity, I had to search high and low for my own piece of heaven, and somehow I actually found it. Folks, I want to introduce you to a game that changed me for better or worse. A little bara hentai harem called Maison DM. Gang, I think this shit may as well be as close to Lost Media as I can get before getting a goddamn Hunt to Killer sponsorship. Maison DM was a visual novel bara hentai that released in 2010 or 2009, dates are very hard to find, from the independent doujin group Underground Campaign. These guys primarily released incredibly explicit bara eroge. Yeah, when I said explicit, I meant it. Bara tends to screw a lot more extreme with its use of fetishes and themes, and I want to point out some of it is pretty problematic. It's niche and a kink for a reason, so again, proceed with caution here folks. I found Maison DM like we all did with Formative Smut. Probably a way too early age and on Tumblr. How I remember watching Akira at like age 13, and that shit's still probably too much for me. These formative little oddities just became tastemakers despite maybe their contents being questionable. Alpha and Leave and Erotica GTs. But yeah, I found this game through a very early translation effort on Tumblr for the game, which sadly died really quickly, only translating about 4 days of the game's actual chapters, leaving most of the game's scenarios unreadable for me as a horny teen. So that is probably why the beginning of this thing is cemented into my brain, because it's all I had. Most of the other titles weren't picked up for consideration of translation, so I had to make do of this slice of life bara eroge, something I am now probably collecting as an adult, to be honest. So because of that, while writing the script, I actually remembered Maison and I was like, oh yeah, shit, that's my harem. Because y'all, it's insane how much it lines up with the mood and contents of even something like Love Hina. Just instead of vague women, you get massive dads.
I want milk, I want to be held, I want to be comforted.
You play as Kusuke, a gay man in his early 20s who just became a groundskeeper for an exclusively gay apartment building owned by his uncle as sort of a little pet project. Chaos ensues when a big straight builder moves in by accident, and the game continues on a weekly basis of shenanigans surrounding the multiple guys who live in the apartment complex, their relationships, and a whole bunch of H scenes. To be honest, even though I've only been able to play the first few days of the game after all these years, you get to meet pretty much every important character and get a general gist of the overarching story. And even in those 4 days, I cannot express how bizarre and out there the events of this little apartment harem goes. I'm not going to go into great detail, because like to maybe not get this video demonetized. But I'll say the shit these large men get up to gets pretty wild very quickly. It's just a goddamn shame I'll never actually get to know where the story goes. Like, there's a guy who's romanceable who is literally just me, for God's sake, and I need to know what this dude's deal is. He's maybe a vampire, I don't know. But alas, the translation project is dead in the water since 2013, and I highly doubt anyone's gonna pick up the... Wait a minute. The Visual Novel Database says the most recent English patch was the 3rd of May 2021? What the hell? Yeah, so turns out someone last year released a new translation patch that continues on for an extra day of content. Just think about how insane this is, folks. The game's online discussion has been dead for over 7 years, and then someone in 2021 takes it upon themselves to continue the effort without any fanfare or anything, and I just happened to be writing this video and remember this obscure-ass Barra Eroge from my teenage years I haven't thought about since, and it just happens now to be getting picked up again by translation? Shit is absolutely insane. I am not even sure if this is an official translation project, or who can be supported, or if it's even gonna continue. It just out of the blue got an update from some user on the Visual Novel Database, and that's it. Barrier to entry on this damn thing is already annoying as hell. Like, let me tell you folks, getting this thing even running on a 2022 version of Windows was an absolute nightmare. The actual Underground campaign website is pretty hard to navigate, and I couldn't even find a buy or download link for the game anywhere bar a trial version that doesn't even let you progress past day 5. Big ol' shout out to the homie King Cruel for helping me get the thing to run at all. I'm pretty useless at getting old PC games running, let alone an Eroge visual novel that runs on a discontinued version of the Kikuri engine. Thank you so much, you funky little dinosaur. You're a real one. Going back to this game as an adult really did shock me in a lot of ways. Not only because, damn, I had really forgotten just how out there some of the H scenes and kinkier discourse gets. Someone on this team has a thing for guys in compromised positions, let me tell you. But to be honest, one thing I didn't really think about when I was younger was the game is pretty lonely. There's a lot of somber scenes with Kosuke in particular. It's pretty clear he's set up to be a pretty generic protag to be passed around by all these men. But there are quite a few moments when you see his worries and self-doubt poked through about being a young gay man in a world that doesn't recognize him. And sure, while he's in a hypersexual house of dads to screw, I found myself coming away from the game with a far more nuanced opinion of what the devs were going for with the game's tone, helped by, quite frankly, an incredibly atmospheric and moody OST. There's one scene in particular early on when Kosuke finds himself at a bathhouse. Something in Japanese culture and gay culture have two very different connotations, but this game blends them together honestly very well from my experience of them. It happens when Kensuke walks home after experiencing a hookup, and there's sort of a relaxed yet contemplative monologue where he walks through the streets of his small town, stops at a vending machine, gets a soda, and simply enjoys the afterglow of a very unique experience he, as a gay Japanese man, would have. And it stuck with me a lot more this time around. It's not a completely sad feeling, but it's not happy or excited either. It's somewhere in the middle. It's hard to pin down. The feeling of being in your early 20s, not really sure if you want to have fun or settle down or just what you even are. And at that moment I realized, fuck. I turned into Kosuke, didn't I? Like, I mean, bar the really weird shit, I've done most of the stuff he has in this game. I've been through the early 20s anxiety, and I'm just starting to come into terms of being no longer a baby gay. It's scary, but fun nonetheless. Just like Kosuke, I now remain as a nostalgic, depressed slut, just trying to find my way in the world. Something I guess, looking back as a teenager, I didn't really expect. I think this game has probably meant a lot more to me than it really needs to, in a funny little way. But hey, the game at least prepared me for that in some regards, which is funny to think about. You don't think about media portraying you literally growing up, especially some nasty hentai you found years ago. But it does show how odd it is growing up as a closet weeb, and a gay in your teens affects you. Hell, I'm sure we all have our own Maison DM in our lives. Which is why I think harems are so universal to so many people. They speak to the lonely teenager weeb that we all wear, and the future we sorta wanted, but honestly, didn't even need in the end. I'm not gonna sit here on this channel and say that Maison DM is a good game or anything, or that you should even look into it, but for me, it was my scrappy little harem that probably morphed me into the idiot that I am today. Just like many people had Love Hina or Oran, I had Maison DM. Similar, I suppose, just really fucking nasty.